during that time of you know, running the ship, what was one of the biggest moments that we know as fans, but was the hardest for you to pull off? Like, there was things behind the scenes made it difficult, but the moment happened.
I mean, it would have to be the night that Hulk Hogan turned heel in the Bash of the Beach in '96. I mean, there were so many things that made that complicated, not the least of which was I wasn't 100% convinced that Hulk was actually going to follow through. And
hear that a lot.
I got to know Hulk pretty well by that point in time, and there's a lot of great things about Hulk Hogan, but there's some aspects to his personality that were challenging for me. One of which is that he would change his mind 6 times throughout a day. I mean, he would second guess himself all the time, and it was somewhat easy to influence him depending on who you were. And I knew that Hulk was excited about doing it, but it was also a giant risk for him. There were, we were paying him a couple $1 million a year at WCW, which was a lot of money and still is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But Hulk was making a lot more money outside of wrestling. He was still getting movie roles. They're cheesy B movies, straight to video movies and such, but he was still making great money. He was getting endorsements. He still had a lot of business. And he was concerned that once he turned heel, that a lot of that business would dry up. And by the way, he had an agent by the name of Peter Young. And Peter Young was one of those guys that he's afraid of everything. He's one of those sky is falling type of personalities. And Peter was absolutely convinced that if Hulk Hogan turned heel, then, of course, Peter's cash cow, his client, all those opportunities were going to dry up and it was going to cost Peter money. And I knew that Peter was one of those guys that was in Hulk's ear. Hulk's wife at the time was in his ear, and she was nuts and, didn't want to disrupt the cash flow and things like that. So there was enough influence around Hulk at the time that I was fairly concerned that at the last minute he would change his mind, so much so that I had to have a plan B in case that day arrived and everybody thought Hulk Hogan was going to show up and turn heel. Of course, there wasn't that many people that knew. That was another thing that made it challenging. I knew, Hulk knew. By that time, the day of the event, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash knew. That was about it. We kept that a secret. And it's one of the reasons why it worked as well as it worked, because it surprised everybody. But not being sure if Hulk was going to show up for that moment was pretty stressful. But we got through it.
So that's so hard to do now.
Who was the backup? Was it Sting? I hear that Sting was the backup. It was him?
Yeah, here's a funny part. Now, it's just funny. I was just flipping through my social media, and I saw Hulk on Logan Paul's show, right? And this was like 20 minutes ago before I got on here. I'm flipping through and I see Hulk explaining this story. And of course, he's got a much different perspective on it than I did.
Standard.
He made it sound like it was his idea to turn heel. Let me tell you a quick story.
Please. Okay, wait a minute. We got a no contest exclusive for the
It's only funny to me because I just saw this clip. But about 8 months before Hulk Hogan turned heel, I went down to Florida in the middle of the week because I wanted to talk to Hulk about the possibility of him turning heel, because the red and yellow thing wasn't working as well as it used to by that time.
Yeah.
He wasn't getting the reactions that he was used to. We were all seeing it. Nobody wanted to say anything, but it was like kind of not working. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go down and put my salesman hat on, pretend I'm selling pop bottle caps door to door. And I'm going to try to convince Hulk Hogan into turning heel. So I get down to his house and pull up, big mansion on the ocean, go into his house. It's like 2:00 in the afternoon, go into his office, hands me a beer, making small talk. Finally, I get into the reason why I'm there. And I start talking to him about at least discussing the idea of turning heel. And he's, stroking his Fu Manchu, nodding his head. That's when you know it's not working. When he starts doing this, it's like, it's over. But he's stroking his Fu Manchu and he looks at his watch and he says, well, Eric, I appreciate you coming down, but the kids are getting out of school and I have to go pick them up. So you can take that beer with you.
Wow.
Whoa.
I said, whoa, that's a nice, and nobody's ever thrown me out of a house or a bar and handed me a beer to take with me, right?
Right.
So I
It's
left.
actually a nice gesture.
Well, it was as nice as it could be under the circumstances. So at that point in time, I went, okay, well, that's never going to work. I'm never going to go to that well again. So now Hulk Hogan's off doing a movie called Santa with Muscles, a classic Christmas movie.
Yeah,
I'm sure
classic.
you've seen it every year. You watch it together with your family.
Of course.
But he's locked down. He's on a set north of LA, somewhere in the mountains. And this is like May. I think it was in May. So he said, Eric, I can't leave. And Hulk wasn't scheduled to do anything with us until October. So he was basically off, right?
Mm.
But he said, look, I can't leave the set. Can you come out? I want to talk to you about where we're going in the future. I said, sure. So I jumped on a plane, flew to LA. By the time I got to his trailer, it was like midnight. It was up in the middle of nowhere. I walk into his trailer, and of course he's sitting there. He's got a case of beer on ice, and I could barely see it. I could barely see him because there's so much smoke in the room. He had a box of Cuban cigars he was puffing away on. We sit down, make small talk again. He leans forward. So, who's the third man? Now, if you remember, Scott Hall shows up, walks through the crowd one week.
What a moment, too, by the way, Eric. I know
that was cool, right?
Passed over that, but bro, that moment was and I don't want to interrupt you, but man, as a wrestling fan, that moment, you're just like, what is happening right now?
It was cool as hell. But when Scott came down, he confronted me and he said, well, next year my big buddy's going to be here. So, okay, who's that going to be, right? Following week, Kevin Nash shows up. Now they lay out the challenge. And they said, we've got a third guy. You WCW guys, go get 3 guys and we'll see you at whatever the pay-per-view was. And it was in June. So now it's a mystery. The whole mystery in the story was who's the third man with Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. I go to Sting. It took me about a week to convince Sting to be the bad guy, right? To be the heel and turn. That was hard too, because he was really not comfortable with it. But I finally got him on board, and he's ready to go. So then I get this call from Hulk. I'm sitting in his trailer. He's stroking his Fu Manchu, and he says, so who's the third man? Well, I didn't want to tell him. Not because I didn't trust him, per se.
Ruin it.
Yeah.
Hulk is like a child sometimes. When he gets really excited, he cannot keep a secret. It's not that he wants to, spill the beans, but sometimes he gets so excited he forgets that he's sharing things that he probably shouldn't share.
Understand.
So I didn't want to answer the question. So I said, well, gee, Hulk, who do you think it should be? Answer a question with a question.
Yeah.
Try to buy time. I should have done that with Ted Turner. But finally I said, oh, Hulk, I don't know. Who do you think it should be? And he went, curls his lips up like that. Looks like a big fish. You're looking at him, brother. I went, oh, wow. And I got because I knew that was big.
Yeah.
So I had a couple beers, smoked a cigar, started heading back to my hotel. And I'm about halfway back to LA. And I'm going, oh, shit. Now I got to go back and tell Sting after I spent a week convincing him to be the heel. And now he's finally excited about it. I get to tell him, never mind. We're not going to do that. But yeah, Sting was, but I convinced Sting because I was just honest with Steve Borden, Sting's name. We had become pretty good friends. I just said, look, I'm not sure he's going to go through with this. He possibly will. Hopefully he will, but he might not. So you need to be ready to be the third guy if for whatever reason he shows up and has a change of heart.
Why do you think Hulk changed his mind? What do you think happened that made him kind of sign off on it?
He saw the story.
Yeah.
He saw the energy. When Scott Hall, the same reason, when you were a kid, you react to seeing Scott Hall coming down and it's kind of like, what the hell is this? I've never seen anything like this before. And then Kevin Nash shows up the following week. And I think Hulk was watching because Jimmy Hart was sending him tapes every week so Hulk could keep up with what we were doing. And I think Hulk saw the way that story was developing and saw it as a great opportunity.
Watch new episodes of No Contest Wrestling every Wednesday or listen wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow us at No Contest Wrestling Podcast on Instagram.